Hello and welcome to Rogue Artisans and Crafters, winner of the 2018 Southern Oregon Television Awards for Best Arts and Culture Show. I'm your host, David Glamour Dave Nienow. We welcome you, our viewer, to our new season of 2019 shows where we feature local artists and craftspeople here in Southern Oregon, and we talk to our featured artists about how they came to their art, what drives them as artists, and find out stories behind their art process, and how their work as artists influences their lives. Today we feature local clay artisan Ray Foster. I found Ray's pottery work while visiting the annual Clay Folk Show. I found Ray's style of clay pottery work quite wonderful and knew at some point that I wanted to feature Ray on the show. And so today we talked to Ray Foster about his life as an artist and the work that he pursues today with his art. And so we welcome Ray to the show.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So Ray, you know, I found your work at the last couple of Clay Folk shows while I've been developing this series. But we never were able to connect actually at the Clay Folk show, but I've always been impressed with the quality of what you display at the show. And so
Thanks
from
very
that,
much.
it was like, oh, I really want to get you on the show and talk about what you do. So to begin with, how long have you been working as a professional artisan with your clay work?
Well, I should admit, first and foremost, I'm really not a professional artist, although I do sell my pottery and I have for years.
Yeah.
I was an educator.
Yeah, okay.
And always had art as an avocation in my free time.
Yeah.
So I had 33 years of teaching high school art
Okay.
in the Rogue Valley. And whenever I could, I would spend time honing my craft and worked primarily in clay for the last 35 years or so.
Okay. And what was it about clay work that kind of attracted you and kind of brought you into that medium?
Well, really it's process oriented. I think that's what I enjoyed most about it because
Yeah.
it starts with a blob and
That's right, yeah.
it's the one chance you have to sort of play God because you're going to turn it into whatever you choose to do on that particular day when you're
Right.
working with it. Because it starts as just a malleable piece of soft earth
Yeah.
or decomposed rock as it is, and then you can shape it however you choose.
Yeah.
And you have total control over the end product, at least in form and shape.
Right. Now, I've done a little bit of pottery work in my life long ago, and my understanding is that there's actually a wide variety of types of clays that you can basically select among.
Yes, what I used to tell my students in the classroom is if you say the word clay, it's like saying the word car. I mean, cars come in all sizes, shapes, and colors, and clay is similar in that it can be almost black, a russet colored, it can be yellow, it can be very white. So it comes in a wide range of textures and colors.
Right. And I imagine that in that selection process of choosing a clay to work, that you then have another set of decisions to make in regards to how you work the clay and how it gets fired and what glazes can be used. And
yeah. There are an incredible amount of variables in the world of pottery. Because it starts with the clay and then the heat you subject it to, and then the surfaces of glaze that you apply and how you apply it and layer it. So there are an infinite amount of possibilities with every surface and form.
And is there a particular type of clay that you primarily choose to work with when you're doing your work?
Yes, there is. For me, basically, I've devoted my pottery making skills to making functional stoneware, things that you can use in the kitchen, you can bake in,
Right.
serve in, drink out of. So the clay has to be durable as a rule, and it has to be able to be fired to a high temperature. All the clay you see here, all the pieces that I brought in this afternoon are fired to about 2,350 degrees,
Oh, wow. Okay.
almost white heat.
Yeah.
And they become vitreous, which means extremely hard and hopefully durable, and the glazes that coat them also.
Right. And so how long is a typical firing process for this type of clay?
It varies from potter to potter. Mine typically run about 10 hours and change. I just had one 2 days ago, and it varies a little bit depending on how full the kiln is and how tight you pack it. Again, more variables. And
Right.
how many pieces are in the kiln have a bearing on how they all look when they emerge 2 days later.
Yeah. And in that firing process, I know that there's like a certain percentage that don't like successfully come through, right? So how often is that? Is that like a regular thing in every firing that you do, or is it just...
It was when I unloaded my kiln this morning, yes. I had about a 2 or 3% attrition. I had experimented with some new clay and some newish glazes, and about 8 or 10 pots out of the 80 were pretty substandard.
Yeah, okay.
They'll be either called seconds or remainders. I might sell them at a garage sale or give them away to students.
Yeah.
So that's pretty typical.
Yeah.
And pretty rare for potters, any potter that I know, to open his or her kiln and have every single piece inside be just what they hoped for. That's pretty rare.
Yeah. And is there... I'm assuming that at a certain point you kind of have like developed certain kinds of formulas for how you, when you start creating a piece, you know that the clay that you're doing, the firing that process that you're going to be doing, the glazes that you're using, that that the formula is going to give you a high percentage of success in the end result.
That's true, and after a while, you want to play it safe.
Yeah.
And then get something inside your kiln, your work, so it's fairly predictable. Potters we aren't lucky like somebody that makes art with fabric or pencil and paper or paint, where you can actually see what you're going to get as you're working. We have to apply glazes on surfaces and then lock them away for a couple of days and subject them to extreme heat and hope that what we did is going to work. That said, I still every year want to try at least one new glaze, add one more color to my palette. Otherwise, I tend to stagnate. I just want to keep growing a little bit, and I want my work to evolve also.
Yeah, well, that's important for every artisan is to go through a normal evolutionary process and developing and improving your skill set and the art product that you're creating.
The gold color on this particular bowl came from a recipe that was given to me by another potter that I studied with 30 years ago. And I kept that recipe around. I thought, well, someday, 30 years later, finally came around. And I mixed up some tests, and I liked what I saw, and put them on some small things, and then larger, and I've finally, it's integrated into my regular routine now on my pottery.
One of the things that appeals to me about your work is that blue is a fairly consistent color in a lot of your work, and blue is like my favorite color. So I have a natural, it gives me a natural appeal to what to a lot of what you do, and I'm into racing, so blue and white is like my favorite color scheme. So it's like I'm seeing like a lot of that in some of your work, and I'm going, oh, that's really kind of cool to see. So
yeah, it's not my favorite color. If I could get away with it, I would probably decorate a lot of my pottery with reds, golds, and browns, but then I would have a gigantic collection of my own work, cluttering my studio. So I have to modify how I decorate and glaze so that my pottery finds new owners. So that means using blue and white.
Yeah. So in I know that you, beyond like the Clay Folk show, you do like other shows that you sell.
I do. I display my work in other galleries. Clay Folk's the only show that I do per se.
But in the process of your selling, you kind of like have gotten like feedback about what kind of color schemes and patterns and designs that your customers kind of like.
Gallery owners are never terribly bashful. They have to make a living, and they will tell me, they're very forthright. They'll say, Ray, your golds or your browns are still collecting dust, but these other items or shapes or glazes are moving really fast. Can you please send us more? So I get that pretty routinely.
Now, like I see, like you've got, like you incorporate like patterns, like natural pattern forms, like you have like leaf pattern in this and in the bowl behind us, and in other pieces. So is that like something that you were like drawing or cutting into the clay and then like applying the color to, or is it, what's your process?
Well, it's layers of glaze. On this particular piece and the others here that have this color scheme, I start with the brown glaze and then lay a pattern of wax, a liquid wax.
Okay.
And then I lay a blue on top of it. But of course, the blue glaze, being when it's applied in a liquid form, won't stick to the wax.
Right. Okay.
And then when it's fired, it leaves a pattern.
Okay.
On there.
All right.
Some potters will take an actual fern and push it into the clay, and there's more than one way to do that to get that effect. That's just how I do it.
Right. See, because that's something that I'd actually kind of heard about in the past, that some clay artisans will like incorporate like natural materials into the clay, like an actual leaf or some other material. And I was just like wondering if that's like your process or if it was something else different.
It's just, that's a pretty common, that's been around for a long time. And this on the white on these, that comes out of my kiln pure white, but then the glaze shrinks and has small little cracks on the surface that I stain with India ink. And that's a process that happens after the entire, the glaze load's been completed and the pot has been removed from the kiln, then you have to apply India ink. And it just stains the little crackled area, so you get a random pattern on that too. Right, and that's one more stage.
Right.
One more process, or one more part of the whole, the whole process of getting the whole thing together when it's finished.
Okay. Well, we have a small slideshow of images of your work that we can talk about. And so if the control room can bring those up, and we'll talk about what we're looking at.
This is a tray. It's probably 14 inches square, made off of a wooden form. The blue on that, which is modeled, the blue glaze, has a fair amount of washed and sieved wood ash out of my fireplace.
Okay.
And it will create the mottled effect that you're looking at there. It's fairly fickle because wood ash is never consistent. It's never the same.
Yeah.
But when it works, it's pretty delightful. It has a soft orange peel feel to the surface. It's nice.
Yeah, okay. Let's go on to the next.
Regular serving dish. This is about a 12-inch piece, this serving tray here. And that's also done with a slab, which a pancake of clay laid on top of a plaster form.
Okay.
And then handles are added.
All right.
And that's one of my standard serving bowls with a rope twist rim and just a very simple glaze pattern on the interior.
Okay. Let's go on to the next.
And that's the tray. This tray is an interesting concept. When I first started doing these, I was at a buffet at a friend's house, and they had a large plastic tray full of mixed nuts that came from Costco. And I took the plastic tray home with me and filled it with plaster and made a form out of it. And that's how I came about with that particular shape.
All right, okay.
And this is one of my, I call it my WD-40 series. It's a fake riveted, kind of industrial looking pot. I made one cup years ago. We'll get to the cups later, but as sort of a gag gift, just sort of a novelty item. But I had a lot of fun. It was well received. The first one I made was for my father, just a drinking cup. I thought he would enjoy. He was a metal craftsman, mechanic, fabricator, and his friends admired it and asked for one, and then their friends, and so I decided to start making those regularly, and I've been doing that ever since, the last dozen years or so.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, on the lower left is a little added piece of clay called a sprig, and that's a little form made of plaster. I just took a little serrated flat washer and made a plaster mold out of it so I can repeat that. So it looks like it's a lot of work. It's actually pretty simple to do. Yeah. And the WD-40 stamps are made of from an old metal stamping that I found in an antique shop, and they make a nice industrial look to it. It looks like the handles have been screwed on, but of course
Yeah.
it's all clay.
Right, yeah.
It's just little pieces that have been added to give the illusion that it's been assembled out of metal.
Right, yeah. And you do a really good job of getting that kind of like industrial old metal kind of a look out of what is
That's
clay.
yeah. It has a slight look of the old granite ware.
Yeah, right.
This is a vase. It's about 14 inches tall. If you look at the bottom there, I try and make all of my things practical, and there is about a 3/4 inch airspace, a dead space, underneath the vase, so that if you fill it, that the customer chooses to fill it with water and keep flowers in it, which I hope they do, then it won't end up weeping through the bottom and creating a problem on your fine furniture. So and I don't say that or have anything written to that effect in my booth when I sell these things, but it's just nice to know that once it goes out and goes to somebody's home, it'll be useful, it'll serve them well, and it won't hurt anything that they've already had in their home.
Right, yeah. And
a pitcher, I've always been infatuated with things that pour. This is an 8-inch tall pitcher. One of the downsides to these slides, you can't really tell much about scale, but I like things that hold milk or cream, gravy, whatever, and I like to make them a little decorative. I use the fern motif pretty routinely, and I like combining orange and blue together, which are opposites on the color scheme, on the color wheel.
yeah.
Large serving bowl. I like a bowl with a nice, attractive handle. I try to make them user-friendly from a standpoint of weight. They're very light. I'm assuming if someone actually uses these that they're going to be full of whatever. If it's not a tossed salad, say it's a meat dish or a vegetable dish and it's heavy, the bowl won't be, it'll still be usable and easy to pass around the table, and the handles fit nicely under fingers. So I've spent a lot of time and effort making sure that they function properly.
Yeah.
I do field test just about everything that I make, and I like to cook and entertain, and it's nice to use your own stuff and get a feel for it and make little adjustments as necessary.
Right, yeah.
A lidded casserole, same thing. I like handles that are easy to grab. I own a few pots from other makers that are beautiful, but not terribly functional with the way the handles work. I try to make sure that if you're wearing a hot pad or a mitten, an oven mitten, that you can still grab it.
Right.
You have to keep in mind that when things are made and used, that they're going to be slippery, and you want to make sure that part of the durability process, the whole appeal of that is that they're not going to slip and fall and break after 1 or 2 uses. There I am. I was lucky enough to spend a year studying pottery in Europe. This is a workshop in Wolf's Castle, which is a functioning high production pottery back in the day in the late 80s, mid to late 80s. And I stayed there for a few weeks, turning out the pots that they would sell, that they would glaze and sell, and wasn't really an apprenticeship, just sort of an extended visit where I got to earn my keep a little bit by making some pots for the man there. And there I was just visiting another potter in southwest England. Those aren't pots that I made there. I was just helping to trim some and talking to one of the local potters there about what it was like to make 80 coffee cups in the morning, attach handles in the afternoon, and earn your keep as a production potter. And I learned a lot during that year, talking to people who did it every day and had to pay the bills with what they sold.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, one of the things I noticed about your the handles on your pieces that you make the effort to also make them to add decorative flair to even the handles, even though they're functional.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, this is something that has evolved. The slide that we had up earlier, the handles were the same color as this part, but I thought they looked better with some contrast.
Yeah.
So I started glazing those a darker glaze for that very reason. It just didn't change the overall shape or function, but it just looked a little better.
Yes.
So those are the kind of things that just evolve over a period of time. I look at things and think, oh, you know what, it would look better if I did this, or if I didn't do something.
Right.
So I'm always modifying and changing, and the work is always evolving, and that never stops.
Yeah. Well, you have some like really wonderful work that you do. And
oh, thanks.
so
I spent my life doing it. It's,
and I look at like something like that, and I think, God, that's like really beautiful. And I know that it's functional and that it can be used for what it's intended, but I'm like, it's also beautifully artistic, and it's like, it's like, I just like kind of like have it on display, And
yeah, I'm hoping that when people buy it, that they actually do use it. But there's nothing wrong with having something that you're using routinely and having it on display. It's nice to look at, or just on the table. So I think some people probably do that. I don't know. I have no idea what happens to most of the work that goes out there. There's a lot of it.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping that it's just a nice thing that people bring out on a special occasion.
Yeah.
Or if they decide to use it routinely during the week, so much the better.
Right. Now, in general, what's like the price range on the work that you create?
Yeah, coffee cups are usually mid-20s, $22, $24. That's the low end.
Yeah.
The things here, like the large platter, would be closer to 90 or 100. And these trays, they come in different, slightly different sizes, anywhere from 40 to 48.
Right.
And the canisters, typically those I have a whole range in sizes, all graduated. They go anywhere from 24 to 54.
Right. Okay.
So it's not really expensive.
Right.
It should be accessible to everybody.
Yeah.
In that price range.
Yeah. And how do people go about purchasing your work?
Well, at Clay Folk is where I sell most of my work during the year. And that's a full booth there every November, the weekend before Thanksgiving as a rule.
Right.
But I also have work in galleries on the Oregon coast, in Bandon and in just south of Lincoln City. There's two nice galleries there that display my work. And I have a nice shop or studio in Jacksonville, where I live and work. And I've had it for about 4 years now, and I do sell out of there occasionally too.
Okay. And do you have any official online?
I don't, and the reason for that is I've just, in the last 4 years, just geared up enough to have enough backstop to do that. And I'm as busy as I want to be, pretty much. So if I know if I got an online source, I would be chasing my tail more than I would choose to do so. I can have a more relaxed pace doing what I'm doing right now.
Well, one of the benefits of having a bigger online presence is that you'd create more demand for and name recognition, but just because you have the increased demand doesn't mean you have to meet the demand.
No. I had a friend that was a potter in England he couldn't keep up with the orders, so he doubled his prices.
Exactly right.
And then the demand increased with it. So it had the opposite effect. So I want to, if I had to keep meeting deadlines, some of the joy of the process would evaporate.
Yeah,
so I would choose to work at a logical and steady pace and enjoy making every piece. And I think they show it better that you've enjoyed the process if you're not in a hurry.
Yeah,
all the time.
well, that's something that I've seen throughout my life, and that when you look at artists' work, when an artist imbues that love of their craft into the piece, it comes out. Right.
It's evident.
Yeah, it's evident. That's right. Yeah.
And if you're in a hurry, you're frequently either your work starts to stagnate, or you take shortcuts on the craftsmanship. And I hope never to do that.
Yeah. Well, Ray, I very much appreciate your coming on to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
So we've come to the end of the show, and so I thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. I appreciate it.
So we've reached the end of our show, Rogue Artisans and Crafters. We thank you at home for joining us and learning about our featured artist, Ray Foster. We wish to thank Ray Foster for agreeing to come onto the show to discuss his life as an artist. I'm your host, David Glamour Dave Nienow, and we will see you next time, Road Valley. We wish to thank you for watching Rogue Artisans and Crafters. You can watch this program on demand by visiting rvtv.sou.edu. You can also follow our show on Facebook by visiting and liking our official show page. Just search for Rogue Artisans and Crafters. You can follow me, David Glamour Dave Nienow, online at my YouTube channel and on Facebook. If you like this show and wish to support me in my show productions at RVTV, you can visit my Patreon page at patreon.com/glamourdave. You can watch this show on Tuesday evenings at 8 p.m. and Thursday evenings at 11:30 p.m. We want to thank our crew who have made it possible to put this program together. Producer and host David Glamour Dave Nienow is winner of the 2018 Southern Oregon Television Awards for Best New Producer and for Best Arts and Culture Show for Rogue Artisans and Crafters.